You are listening to How to Get Over Your Ex, episode number 103, Too Far Gone. Welcome to How to Get Over Your Ex, a podcast on getting over your ex without it just taking time. I'm your host, breakup coach Dorothy. Let's turn your pain into power and your heartbreak into happy. Hello, beautiful Bravehearts. How are you doing? I am sending you all the love right now. So much love. I just want to hug you and snuggle with you. Maybe that's weird. I love snuggling. So now, if you are new to the podcast, welcome. But please be sure to listen to episodes 1 through 5 before diving into this episode. I want to be sure that your time is well spent. And if you don't know the basics of my teaching, this episode might not make sense to you. And this is also an episode that's a little bit different. I am doing an interview for this episode, and normally my episodes are very short, straightforward to the point with next steps. And that doesn't mean that you don't get next steps or great, amazing, beautiful insight in this episode. However, I just want you to get a taste of what the show is really, really like. And that is through episodes 1 through 5 before diving into other episodes throughout the podcast, because that will all teach you the basics. So be sure to check those episodes out first and then come back. I love you. And I am so excited for you to listen to this beautiful podcast because it will literally change your life. All right, now for my avid Braveheart listeners, today I have 2 special guests for you. These Braveheart alumni were in the last round of the Get Over Your Ex in 3 Months or Less program. They're beautiful, wonderful humans. Like legit, one of them calls me Sparkle Danger, and I'm just like, where did you come from? I love you. I'm so obsessed. I love meeting you Bravehearts, and it's just like one thing to meet you guys via Instagram, which I love so much. It's a whole other thing where I spend 3 months with you, and I just love it. I adore all of you so much. So maybe I should just say that. I adore all of you so much. I love you. I'm grateful, and it's so fun to meet you all. Anyhow, now these 2 guests have been so amazing. They have amazing, beautiful stories, and their journey throughout the 12 weeks together was very epic and amazing. And honestly, it was truly filled with the 50-50 experience. And I cannot wait for you to hear their journey. Now, I get really emotional talking about this concept and this idea of too far gone because I've experienced this feeling before and I've seen others experience it. And I'm just so glad that these 2 were brave enough to come on and talk about this idea and help others who might have the same thought pattern that's holding them back from getting and asking for the help that they might need or that they may not they might want to get throughout their heartbreak and their breakup journey. And before we dive into today's topic, I want to talk about hope a little bit because it's a common thing that happens when people join the Get Over Your Ex program. One of the first things I hear them say to me is, I hope this will work, right? I hope I get over my ex. And I'm sure they're not the only ones thinking that. And I'm sure they're not the only ones that I talk to that are thinking that. And I want to offer to all of you who might have this, this idea lingering in your head, I want you to learn how to decide instead of hope. I want you to stop hoping in your life, and I really would love for you to explore deciding. Because when we hope, even if you're hoping that your ex comes back, or you're hoping that you find a better partner than your ex, or you're hoping that you'll create an amazing future, what you're essentially saying is, this is outside of my control. When in reality, it's 100% in your control, because you control your thoughts, you control your feelings, which then fuel the way you show up in the world and therefore the results you create. So when you stop hoping and you decide, I'm going to create a better partner, or I'm going to create a life bigger and better than the one I had with my ex, you feel determined and committed, which fuels action of going out and doing just that. So the first thing I teach those individuals who sign up and say, I hope this works, is Let's change that thought pattern to I'm going to make this work. This is 100% going to work for me. Dorothy is on my team. She's on my side. She's here to help me, and she's not going to let me fail. And I want to offer that to any Braveheart who is out there right now needing any kind of help, right? You have got this. You're going to make this work. You're going to go out and create whatever you most desire. And honestly, it is going to be bigger and better than the one that you could have ever even imagined on your own. Your life is going to be phenomenal. And I'm going to be here for you throughout the entire thing. You're not alone. You've got all the Bravehearts with you along the way as well. Okay? All right. So let's dive in. Without further ado, please welcome Sarah and Tara. So I want to introduce Tara and Sarah. Thank you both for being here. Why don't both of you guys just do a quick intro of who you are, what you do? Tell us a little bit about yourself. Tara, you can go first.
Sure. So I live in Texas. I work in communications and public affairs, and have been living in Texas my whole life. I was overseas for a couple of years, but was in a. Do you want us to go into breakup stories now or do it later? Okay.
Let's do it. Go into it.
Okay. So I was in a 3-year relationship with someone, half of it long distance, half living together, and was always very clear about my desires and expectations to have a family and get married. And he delayed and delayed and delayed until eventually we got to a point where I couldn't wait any longer. And so and he didn't really have a reason to cite for not being ready. And so it was a difficult breakup. It was devastating because I had a lot of faith in us and a lot of belief in our love. And I was I think just in disbelief that that faith wouldn't equal something working out. And so I have been not through serious relationships, breaking up like that, but rejections in the past. And I just had this habit of living in the past and not being willing to let go and really not getting over someone until I met the next person, which could be years. And I just didn't want to do that. I really didn't want to do that this time. And so I got a therapist. I did all the Googling. I searched for podcasts and found yours, and it just brought me a lot of relief. One of the reasons I wanted to do this is I identified so much with one of your guests, Megan, that you had on, and that was when I really saw myself in your sort of process. And then I heard on one of your episodes you had extra spots, and I was like, I think this is meant to be. So
don't you love that? I will always remember. I remember you reaching out on Instagram, wanting to be in contact with Megan, and Megan's so great. She's amazing. And so
yeah.
she's like, I remember reaching out to her being like, hey, don't feel obligated or anything, but someone wants to talk to you from the podcast. And would you do that? And she's like, yes. And now she's literally going to life coach certification now. And I'm like, finally, that took you way too long.
Oh, good.
I'm
That's awesome.
So excited for her.
Yeah.
And then I remember you reaching out to being like, I want into the program. And that was exciting too. You got in right in the nick of time.
I know, it was like the day before or something.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I love it. So. Awesome. Sarah, tell us about you.
So I'm a therapist. I came to this work with a lot of other healing perspectives under my belt and even some prejudices about coaching and thought work. Well, actually not thought work generally. I'd done a lot of the work of Byron Katie and was very, that resonated very deeply. And that was sort of my in to okay, I'll learn this new technology and see. But the biggest thing for me, so my breakup story is very similar to Tara's in the sense that what we were dealing with was somebody holding out a hope like somebody offering me my deepest hopes and desires and saying that it was coming. And if I had actually ever thought to check in with myself and evaluate if it seemed realistic that those hopes I would have actually quite easily been able to tell you no. But I guess what I've learned from all this is like how compelling your deepest hopes and desires are. And that if somebody says like it's coming, you really do need to watch for if it seems realistic or not. But so anyway, I found myself in this situation where I was completely emotionally dependent on one human being during COVID. He was like the only person I was talking to every day. We got super close during that time. The short version is he decided to start a new relationship before ending our relationship. I begged him not to do that. He sort of said he wouldn't and said he wasn't doing that, and I believed him, and then we still decided to end our relationship, but I thought it was under different terms than it was, and then it turned out that actually he hadn't stopped seeing her. So it was this weird situation. But the hardest part for me going through it, the biggest thing was the sense of betrayal. Like Tara, I just had this like in my bones trust in us, and so the contrast of like the trust in us versus what actually played out was such a shock to my system. I'm sure there's people listening who are like, yes, girl, like the level of physiological repercussions, like I was in so much agony. I couldn't believe how painful it was. And then also there are people in my life and in my family who'd been through betrayal, and I've literally seen them live the rest of their lives never recovering, like living decades of their life bitter, resentful, watching their mental health deteriorate. So I was terrified. Like I was like, this is the most emotional pain I've ever experienced in my life. I didn't even know it was possible to experience this much emotional pain. And I've seen people's lives get ruined because of this experience. And I was so terrified that that was going to be me. Plus we were entering into winter. I live in Toronto, and we were entering into lockdown, and it was scary AF. And I thought I had actually missed the opportunity to register for your course because I thought it had started in December, and I'd cobbled together all of these like healing modalities, and I was doing all of the things, and I was listening to the podcast. So I did all of that for December. And even though I was like working my butt off and really committed and processing tons of emotions, I just realized that like it just wasn't the same thing as having somebody who could literally like hold your hand. And like even from like day one, and not only from day one but from content one, where you're like every single time content dropped, it was like yes, 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 like so fucking relevant. Like it was just like, so the thing that I think of when I signed up is I kept telling my supervisor, I kept being like, there should literally be like a hospital that people can go to. Like there should literally be like a rehab or like I'm like, we should open like a heartbreak hotel. And like there should be a place people can go when they're just mangled by another human being because of like heartbreak.
I so agree with that. I'm so on board with that. That might be something we do. And we bring the therapists and the coaches together. We bring all the modalities. And like in this next round, we're bringing in guest speakers and guest coaches and all kinds of stuff. And it's like all the different modalities that I've used kind of throughout my journey in the past, 5 years. And I'm like, I love that idea where it's like, yeah, a rehab situation, or like, instead of calling it rehab, maybe we call it like a retreat, a heartbreak retreat. But
I
100%,
like
I
the
love
idea
that.
of rehab though, because I really did feel that broken. Like
it feels like addiction too.
Yes.
So
Yes.
Yeah. The withdrawal is so
yeah.
intense. It's so painful. Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
Can I touch on something that I didn't, reference ahead of time? So if this is like an off the cuff answer for you, but what about I do love that you're a therapist and you brought up therapy versus coaching, all of that,
Mm-hmm.
because I think that I have a couple things to say about that. And I would love just kind of your viewpoint and your perspective
Mm-hmm.
being a therapist. So in my world, when I'm coaching, I think there is a time and there's a place for therapy and a time and a place for coaching. And I love them when they're combined together. Because I personally believe if you're suffering from a like severe depression, you can't get out of bed, you're like, just completely at the bottom of the bottom where you're just feeling like you can't actually do your day-to-day activities. I am all about therapy. I'm like, get your butt into a therapist, see a psychologist. Like, let's get on, like, let's do some things about that. But then once you're above that kind of, it's almost like I would say like a threshold of being able to just function, just doing your bare minimum functioning activity. You might not be happy about it, but like you're doing it. Then that's when I'm like, coaching can be so fundamental and so amazing and life changing. And then that's when I'm like, I like them when they're combined too, because when it comes to heavy trauma, I think therapy is great for heavy trauma and the whole feeling of your feelings. If you need to like go back in your past and really rehash a lot of that, that's where I feel like therapy is so beautiful. I guess, what are your thoughts, and, any Bravehearts who are listening and just kind of curious about like, do I do therapy? Do I do coaching? Do I do both? What can you tell us what your thoughts are about that?
So there's a couple of different things that come to mind. The first one is in the training program I did. One of the teachers was like, look, we are not glamorous. She's like, we are the plumbers of the healing world. She's like, we're just trying to unplug all this shit. And then when I think about coaching, it's like interior design,
Yeah, that's so great.
But some people want to jump to the interior design and there's like cracks in the foundations and literal shit clogging up the pipes, and it's like, you really do need to do both. Mm-hmm. Like, and you need to know, like, my biggest concern, not only going into it but also in working with myself in this model, is that the strong tendency. So the other thing I want to say about healing is that you can do the bottom up approach or the top down approach. And I know you've mentioned a little bit about this, where like some of your people are more in the world of like somatic healing, and they're like, who cares what your thoughts are? Like, feel your feelings, Yes. And then so one of the issues with dealing too much with the top down, or not even too much, but just with the wrong agenda. Like, if you have an unconscious agenda, which most of us do, to repress your emotions, then thought work is working against your healing, depending on how conscious you can get of how you're using it. But what I came to see is that you can use thought work to actually like clear the channel and let that bottom up stuff more up and out and like support and facilitate the healing process.
I love that.
Badass.
I love that, because that's the part where it's like, oh, we are also helping unclog the drain, just in it's just a different way. Absolutely. I agree. I love that analogy. That's great. I like that.
It's very you.
It is. You guys know me and my analogies. I'm obsessed. Okay, awesome. So that's amazing. Thank you both for introducing yourself. Let's talk about all the things. So the first thing I want to touch base on over here, my notes is, I want to talk about, who did you become within the 12-week journey? So within the 12 weeks together, who did you become, and what were kind of like your biggest takeaways? Who wants to go first? Tara, you want to go first?
Yeah. I think that I guess I'll start with the takeaways, because I feel like it's a journey and it's not like like one day I'll feel this and one day I'll feel that. And that was my biggest takeaway. So I think I remember so vividly, like about halfway through the program, I was just so resistant. And I remember you saying, like, I'm giving you all the tools. I'm telling you like exactly what to do. Why does your brain think that it can't do it? And it was just like this light bulb moment of realizing that it was a choice. And Sarah and I would talk about, like, how do you define progress? And one of the things we would say is, like, progress is a series of choices. So it's like, it's one choice after another. And And I think just realizing that I have that choice every day and that I'm only a choice away from being over him again. And I'm sure we'll get to that question later, but I just, the intentionality of it all and the power that it gives you and the confidence you start to have in yourself, I think are just magical tools. And it's not to say that you're going to feel confident every day or you're not going to feel the pockets of grief again, but that ability to manage, I don't even like the word manage, but like just be one with yourself and kind of move with it and gently redirect yourself back to all these wonderful truths that you find out during the program. I think was just the biggest takeaway. And there were a couple others. I didn't realize till late in the program that I had an issue with feeling my feelings. I thought I had mastered that in like the first week. And I think I even put in the Slack channel, I was like, I'm like actually really good at that part. But, and then just through like thought work and realizing kind of what Sarah said, where thought work sometimes doesn't work because you're trying to put a band-aid over feelings that you're not letting yourself feel. I think that was a big realization for me sort of towards the end of the program, that actually if you sit with your feelings and don't be afraid of them. And for me, like, like I'm always afraid I'm going to spiral. I'm going to spiral from a bad feeling, or I'm anxious about an event because I think something will happen and then I'll spiral. Like I just had all these stories around what pain does and what it means. And I think what I've learned is it's never really as scary as you think it is if you just embrace it. And I'm actively working that every day. I'm by no means an expert at that, but that was a huge takeaway for me. And I mean, I have so many, Dorothy, that I could tell you. I think the one that brings me the most comfort and the one that I kind of picked up on pretty quickly was this thought of like nothing has gone wrong here. And I have a pretty strong Christian faith, and I always thought I had a lot of faith, but my thinking was never aligned with my faith. And I didn't realize that until I was in this program. And the idea of like co-creating with God, like having faith and then like letting that faith like sort of steer you, not in a way of like giving up your agency, but like not resisting that things could be happening for a reason. I don't know if that made sense, but
It's one of my
yeah.
favorite things that happens in the program. Like,
Yeah.
and I feel like it's probably my favorite thing because it's also something that changed my life drastically. It was when I decided to have faith in something bigger than myself. And when you do, you then have a sense of trust that builds certainty within your life. And what Tara worked on, or at least what I had in my notes here that I wanted to talk about when it came to you specifically, Tara, is really not being attached to all of your outcomes, not being attached to the how, but rather just being committed to what you truly want and knowing that you are co-creating the entire time with God or whatever you believe is higher than you. And it's always working for you, not to you. And that was something I feel like you really learned to embrace throughout that program.
Yeah. And it's not easy. Like I think there are parts of everyone's life where that's really hard to do, to believe that like even when you see all this evidence against what you're trying to create, that there's something bigger working at play, and that what you learn through thought work is actually through thinking that, all the elements are against you, you just start to like create more of that. So
And that's why coaching's so huge. Like, that's why
yeah.
I'm like, that's why we need coaches in all of the different facets of life, because I don't have a problem with that when it comes to when I think about baby Marilyn. I'm like, she's a done deal. I have no drama around it. But when it comes to other aspects of my life, I like get the hangups, right? And I'm a coach and I do this every day, but I still have hangups and I'm human. Like, I do all of the things that I talk to all of you guys about. So I'm glad you mentioned that too, because if you can conquer it in one aspect of your life, yes, you're going to apply in other areas, but it will be a process. It will be a journey. It's always evolving, which I'm sure
Yeah.
Sarah will actually talk about that. I'm sure.
Well, I even want to say in this moment, and like that's so much like, I feel like that's so much how this stuff works. Like the whole premise of what you talk about is that like this really can be a transformative. I'm gonna cry. Like this really can be a transformative moment of your life. And I was so scared about the type of transformation that was going to happen. And it's so clear on the other side that like I could never have gotten here without this experience. Like I'm so dedicated to personal growth, and I was just as dedicated to personal growth before this happened, and the level of like strength and expansion, clarity. And then when Tara talks about how, and it's a process, like it keeps happening, it's like, yeah, you get stronger and the weights get heavier, and it's like, and you get clearer about how like the proper form, and the weight gets piled, you know. Like it's like there's still growth to do. Like why would you even not want to be growing, especially when you really start to have faith that like it actually is for me, like there's no question. So
And I'm glad you said that too, because there's always, and there's growth happening even in having, which I don't know if this is going to come off right, but it's like, even when you get to where you want to have arrived, there's still growth there, because you have to learn how to hold, you have to learn how to have, and like be that new version of yourself. And there's growth even in that. And it's, and the analogy that you were using, Sarah, it's like you put on those weights. Not only do you do the weights, but then you have to learn how to carry them for a while at that weight before you put the weight on.
Totally.
So crazy. I'm glad you got that.
Even like from the more like embodied or like somatic perspective, I noticed that like some of the things I'm saying, like they're so true to me, like they're so true, and yet my body isn't used to holding these truths, and I can feel like a certain amount of like shakiness, and it really is, it's like like growth happens in all directions. It's like you really do need to learn how to face the heartbreak of life with more strength, but you also really need to learn how to face growth with like it's uncomfortable to expand too.
Yeah.
And how to support that.
Yep. I love it. I love it. So Sarah, why don't you tell us a little bit too about your journey, the 12-week journey that you had? What were your biggest takeaways? I also, I guess I have a couple of notes here, but I'll let you talk first.
I just think like profound self-trust was my biggest takeaway. And it's so hilarious because like I feel like the me I felt I needed to show up as was like so not trusting, like not trusting of myself and not trusting I was doing enough or gonna get it right or gonna succeed. I felt I needed to like prove myself or and actually so much of that had to do with the breakup too, like feeling like I was so rejected. It's like, okay, well then I need to get past him instantly. And it was like I needed to prove something to him, to myself. I had shit going on with me with you that like, you know, Dorothy's not going to approve of me if I don't XYZ. And it was like, so this actually really resonates with what Tara was saying earlier too about like, I forget exactly what words you use, but it's just like part of what's gorgeous about this particular process is like it's like those truths were always there. I just needed to truly like uncover them and like put some cognitive structures around them to fully own them and embrace that like I totally know what I'm doing. And like, like you know, I don't know why, but I learned I needed to pretend like I don't. I learned how to like pretend like I needed to prove myself to everybody, but like deep down, I know what I'm up to. I know what my truth is, and like I just needed more support to get clear about that. And that was really huge. Like I think the thing I'm the most impressed with about, I don't even mean like myself, like this process and the before and after is like my behaviors are just so aligned. Like I used to always live like wanting to be a certain person and like not knowing, and like I'd do anything, like I would hustle and work hard and try things, but it was like I didn't know how to invest my energy in a way where I'm like I'm definitely aligning my behaviors, like my everyday behaviors, with who I actually want to be. And there's like no question now that I do that. So
that was everything I had as my notes. I was literally like, my biggest thing for you, Sarah, was just like you learning to trust yourself and know that you're showing up exactly as the way that you're supposed to. And like, really love that about yourself.
Yeah. And to feel confident that it's a contribution too.
Yeah. Okay, so that kind of really leads me into the next question that I had, where I want to talk about getting over your ex. What did it mean to you coming in? What does it mean to you now? And do you feel like this process was about getting over your ex or more about you? And like, let's talk about all of that.
I think, like I mentioned, for me, attachment was always the issue after something would end with someone. And so I think coming in, I wanted to not have that attachment. And I think reflecting on it's not that I wanted to like make sure I didn't love him by the end of the program or I didn't have feelings for him. Or we talked about this a lot. Like if he came back and he came back in the right way, that it would be okay if I took him back. Like I didn't want it to mean like, oh, I hate this guy and like all ties are cut. I think I just wanted to have my autonomy back and not have my like emotional state so dependent on another person like it had been really my whole life in these situations. And I think that stayed pretty consistent throughout the program. I was never really hyper focused on like, am I over him? When will I be over him? I was always afraid of triggers. So I would judge my progress based on like, could I handle this? And like, could I handle this? And I mean, you kind of prepped me for some of those things. And it always turned out that I could. And I think at the end of the day, even like last week, I went through another similar situation that I was very nervous about. And I was telling Sarah, like the neutrality I felt in the moment that I was able to just like be with myself and not freak out and um, just stay within my truths. Like this thought that we talk about my internal beliefs are more important than my external observations. The
Oh my God.
ability
Can I stop you for just a second?
yeah.
So the podcast that I did about that is already released, but I didn't name your name because I didn't know if I could yet. But now I
Oh,
can say,
please.
you guys, it was Tara. So good. So good. Okay, continue. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, that's okay. I guess all this to say like that authority over myself is really all I wanted. Like that's what I wanted to take away from it. So for me, like being over him means that every day I can choose that and I have the tools to choose that and I want to choose that. That's a really important one. Like the what I forget what you call it, like the why or the have a compelling
Compelling
reason.
reason. Yeah.
Like I wanted to have that. And actually, I mean, that's probably the most important part in like feeling like you can get over someone, that you have a compelling reason, you have like a belief that you can act on that, and you have the tools to make that happen every day. So am I like, do I not have any feelings for him anymore? No. But do I know that I'm like acting in my best interest, that nothing's gone wrong, that I'm like creating the momentum in my life? Yes. And to me, that's the magic. That's the most important part.
I love that. Beautiful. Sarah, what about you? So, what did you think being over your ex was going to be coming into the program? And then where were you at the end of the program when it came to being over your ex and what that meant to you then? And then I remember too, for you specifically, you had a little bit of drama of being like, what if I don't get over my ex?
More than a little bit. One thing I really want to say is that Tara and I actually worked really hard together. One of my biggest takeaways is my friendship with Tara.
I love that.
Yes.
I mean, this is the power of the group, right?
At week 6, we both got like dead fucking serious and we were like, all right, like there's 6 weeks left. And we started like checking in like multiple times a day, like really, really doing the work. I totally lost my train of thought. Anyway,
it's fine. I love that.
She knows how much drama.
We both did. Yeah.
I love it. Okay. So what do you think about being over your ex now in comparison to when you started the program?
Oh, honestly, the difference is that in the beginning, I had like an unreasonable expectation based on, this is wild to see actually, but I can see that it's because of some of the ways he acted at the end made me feel so worthless. Made me, you're not supposed to say that. Language of responsibility.
Well, our thoughts made us feel worthless.
Yeah. I was really like at core, like, okay, like I clearly have no worth on the planet based on XYZ behavior. And then so it's like, oh, if I don't have any worth to this person, then I have to become this. Like, this is the only identity that makes sense. But truly, like deep down, I really felt what Tara felt is I just wanted my autonomy. I really just wanted to have this like sovereign sense of self. And I even had like a very, very clear image in my head of like this woman who could lovingly sit with herself, with compassion, with whatever was still coming up about this heartbreak on the other side of 12 weeks. That's what I really, really wanted deep down. And I fucking nailed that. And I really feel like I can't even take credit for it in some ways. Like it feels like that's what happened with like commitment and support. But like that's what I really wanted. But it's interesting because I really did need to work through all of the like the expectations and the self-image, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that, like feeling like you want to just like look a certain way. And it's funny because we're like completely no contact, he's blocked on everything, so every expectation that I had for myself wasn't even something that would ever be paraded in front of him or anything that he would ever see or even hear about. But it was like I needed to be an image of myself for my own sake at certain points, until I was able to settle into something like more authentic that actually works, you know?
Yeah, 100%. I did that significantly in my breakup, which I'm sure everyone's heard about before, but I'll just recap quickly. But it's like 100%. I was like for me, it was like I wanted to be the person he wanted me to be. And I like wanted to prove to him that I could be that person. And it was like, even though I was blocked from all the things and we didn't have any contact, I still wanted to do that so that if there was any chance that he would see it and he would know. And then
and it's also just this thing of like you're still living your life in reference to them. Like even if you're
Yes.
competing with them and you're like gonna be better than whatever, it's like you're still living your life in reference to that human.
Yes. Yeah, because you're not making decisions for you. And that's where it comes down to you, where you like overcame that. And like you were talking about before, all of your behaviors now thoroughly align with who you want to be.
Totally.
For you, not for someone else.
Yeah. And it really is interesting, like again, with like the growth and expansion thing, like how, and that was actually part of why deep down I really was like, because with my therapy background too, like I'm very familiar with the concept that what we are dealing with in our present instance is it's a recreation of past experiences that we didn't have enough support to actually digest at the time. So I even had this deep down like, I actually don't care how long it takes to fully digest this, because I know it is not just about this situation. And I know that the people that it's actually about, I don't have any charge about anymore in real life. But this I have charge about. So this I want to work on, and I don't want to put a timeline on when the charge has to be gone by, because I just want the healing. I just want to keep going deep with it until it's done.
I just got the chills. You guys, I just got the chills. Because this is what I'm talking about when it comes to becoming the person who's over her ex, right? Becoming that's more important to me than you actually getting over your ex, is becoming the human who is over their ex. Because then that naturally and organically happens that you are over your ex.
Yeah, truly. And because it's even to the point now where it's like the inner work I'm doing, like it's so obvious to me that like the real him, if the real him like walked into the room, like he would so not be able to connect with the depth of like the amount of time I've spent processing our relationship. Like I feel like even more intimate with him now in some ways than I did then, but he couldn't even digest it when we were together. Like it's like it's like the real him couldn't even touch some of, he wouldn't have the tools for it. So yeah. I don't think I articulated that well, but
no, but I totally agree.
The real him. It's the him I'm working on or still processing.
Beautiful. I love that. I'm so glad you brought that up. Okay, so I'm going to try to talk about this part without crying.
Don't just cry. I'm so pro tears.
I literally like wrote it down verbatim so I could just try to read it without crying. Okay, so something that tends to come up from time to time, more frequently than I would like to see, is that brave hearts will come to me and they feel like they're too far gone. They feel like they can't be helped. And they truly believe that there is no way that they will ever get over this. So I want to know if you guys have ever felt this way, and I want to know what your thoughts are about it and what would you tell them?
Okay, I feel like I want to answer this one first because I feel like I'm queen. I'm the queen of the two broken people. I am the most two broken.
I don't know about that.
And I actually, honestly, that's even why so much of the proving stuff comes up too, because part of what I see is that you have to prove yourself if you really believe you're too broken to be fixed on your own terms, then you have to give your authority away to somebody else. Like you have to just hope that like breakup coach Dorothy approves of me and then maybe I'll get somewhere, if you really, really believe you're too broken. And so I don't, I just, yes, deeply, deeply relate. And even the stories I had going into it, honestly, the stories I had going into it were I watched people that lived out I'm too broken. And honestly, I never told you this, but like an uncle of mine actually took his own life when somebody left him. Like it's people who like fully bought into like I cannot handle this. It's too much. And
Mm-hmm.
so yes, I relate. And I really want to say like this is so cliche, but it's like it really, really is like the most broken places within you. If you can, I think that's my biggest takeaway is when you really own it. Like I really kept owning it. I wouldn't invalidate the parts of me that needed validation. And it's such a fine line between like self-validating that pain and buying into it. Like you don't want to come and try and prove that I am too broken to be fixed, but you do really, really want to process the part of you that truly believes she is too broken to be fixed. Like she needs some support more than any other part of you. So you don't want to like hide or bypass or pretend her away.
I'm glad you said that because it kind of reminds me. I was at a retreat in Bali, and I think it was my coach Lindsay that said this, but I can't remember. But someone said at one point where it was like all ages live within us.
Mm-hmm.
And so when that happened, all of a sudden I saw all the ages of myself like come up and through my body. And like when I would be triggered by something, I was like, oh my gosh, that's 26-year-old version of me who was heartbroken and betrayed and like was the victim, like was absolutely a victim of something. It doesn't mean she has to be a victim of it now today, but she absolutely was. And she needs to validate that. And we need to acknowledge that. And I need to say, hey, 26-year-old Dorothy, that fucking hurt. And it was sucky and it was dumb. And I'm sorry that happened to you, but I'm here for you.
Yeah, totally. And what that made me think of even was just like this analogy kept coming to my head like during the breakup, because so much of that relationship was about me truly making things that were happening in the relationship, making it mean negative things about me. And I would get this image of like all these like sticks of dynamite that I had agreed to like put inside my being. And it was like he had the detonator, and I assumed that there was enough trust and care. And that is like, I housed all of the dynamite in my body. Like I took care of you emotionally, and I protected you from these limitations that you had with compassion. I didn't consciously realize how many negative things I was making those things mean about me, but I did believe I was safe in the relationship. And it was so clear as it was ending. It really was this moment of like somebody hitting the plunger or something, because I was like, it was so clear how many negative things I had taken on and internalized and lived with. And it was like, it's, in the movie, what is it? The Life Aquatic, right before the helicopter goes down. I think the Bill Murray character like looks at the Owen Wilson character. He's like, this is gonna hurt. Like, it's like, I was like, oh my God, like this is gonna fucking hurt.
What would you,
Yeah.
Sarah, what would you tell people if they're in that place where they feel like they can't be helped and that they're too far gone? Like what would you tell them?
Get support for that part. Don't bypass that part. And there really is a difference between like buying into it and believing it, but for fuck's sakes, don't suppress it. Like, do not. Like, get that part some support, get heard, feel those feelings, get in front of a human being that you can feel their compassion for you strong enough that those tears will come out, and that's how it works.
I love that.
That's
beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you. Tara, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think for me, it's always been more about the fear of pain than my actual experiences with pain. And honestly, sometimes it's hard to separate the two because in my head, it's just this like giant scary monster. But I've lived my whole life feeling like I have to protect the perfect circumstances in my life. Like I have this profound fear of my parents dying, like because, it's getting better, but like I always thought if that happened, I'm not strong enough to handle it. Like I will crumble. I'm gone. That's that's the end of Tara. And for me, it was about a lack of belief in my ability to handle pain. And I I've I feel like I've learned so much about myself in the past couple of months about how you can give yourself a little bit of trust to handle things and you will blow your own mind. You'll surprise yourself. And, like I think if I were to tell somebody anything, like I remember thinking, like Sarah and I would talk about how like this may be harder for us. Like it's possible that this is a harder thing for us than for other people, but it's not impossible. And there's like a quote in the Bible about like a mustard seed of faith, or like you just need like a little like tiny smidgen. And I would tell people like just leave a little bit of room for magic, like just a little, believe in it, like try it and let yourself surprise yourself. And I'm talking about a very different thing I think than Sarah was, which was like some of those like deeper like trauma emotions. And for me it was really just fearing my own brain and fearing my own like thoughts that were going to bring me in, like bring me down and do me in. And gosh, like, and I always used to think like if I can nail that, like I'll live a free life, and I feel like I'm getting there. Yeah.
You guys touch my soul. Like I could just sit here and just cry and cry and cry as we talk.
One of the things that Tara just said that I think was important too is that, because actually this was something like you just said like it might have been harder for us or something, and I actually think that there's a relationship between like skepticism and being serious about getting what you came for. And I would also like when you said what would you tell people, I'm like also that, like also like really keep asking, does this feel right, does this feel right? Because even like on the other side of it, the ways that the thought model that you taught us does work, like for me the nuances about what is like truly healing about it and problematic about it, like that's a subtle distinction. Like it's worth fleshing out and getting nuanced about the difference between like, am I just trying to delude myself and bullshit myself and set myself up for more pain in life by not being real about what happened, or am I supporting myself to flourish and heal and move and grow? And it's like, it's important to find your way with that.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because that's the importance of asking the questions, right? Like you've got to ask the questions. You've got to get help through that because of that distinction. It is so, and I hear that from time to time from people who will be like, they'll listen to the podcast and they're on top of it and they're like, it's amazing. I'm doing so great. And I'm like, that's awesome. That's so great. And then like a couple months later, they come back and they're like, I got to do your program because something's not sticking. Right. And I feel like that's when there's the difference between you haven't found the balance, kind of what we were talking about earlier, but the balance between really questioning your beliefs and really questioning the truth of them and questioning not only just the truth of them, because we can find truth in anything, but questioning if it aligns to you. Going back to Sarah, like, does this belief align to the person I'm becoming? And if not, really questioning and getting down and like digging up. It's like the way I would, there's a difference between, I've got all kinds of analogies going on in my brain right now. I'm like, in my mind, we're taking a bulldozer and we're digging up an entire tree. We're not just like painting the tree gold.
For sure.
And so that's the difference. And I feel like that's where you get help, where you are able to ask those questions and like help have guidance going through that process is so different than trying to do it on your own. And I don't want to say that because there are people like you can do this. I just think it's very different when you do it with someone else.
Massively different when you do it on your own.
Yeah.
Because, and that was the thing I wanted to really express too about like, because I have a lot of tools and like I was applying those tools, like I was using like nervous system regulation stuff. I was doing like really deep emotional work on the work helpline every single day, sometimes 2 or 3 times a day. And it's just not the same thing as having a structure for a specific problem
Yes.
that you're dealing with. The other thing I want to say about the tree thing is that the one thing I was never skeptical about this model, and I haven't mentioned the part that's like easily accessible and very helpful, is also, I imagine that part of where people get stuck is the difficulty uncovering what they are believing, because you can be conscious of certain thoughts and work on certain thoughts, but you can also be believing all sorts of shit that you're not conscious about, that a coach will help you become conscious of. And you also have a lot of insights to offer. Like you also have like a sort of a bunch of, like you've actually gained insight on specific thought patterns and you've found your way out of them without bullshitting yourself and supporting your own growth and healing. And those are always nice psychological chiropractic adjustments to get to.
I love that you call them chiropractic adjustments. That's exactly what they are. What a great, yes, 100%.
Like, that's better.
Yes. I love that.
Yeah. I think for me, like the most impactful like observations you would make were like, okay, you have this thought because you're trying to create this result, but this thought actually gives you the opposite result. Like, and I don't know, maybe that's just like my logical brain responded to that. But when I was able to wrap my head around that in a couple of different areas of my life, and then remind myself of that, like your brain, like it's trying to help you, God bless it, but like it's doing it all wrong in some of these places. And I just think that awareness and redirection of those thoughts, like to me, it just like logically makes sense. And it makes sense that I need to shift these thoughts because it's not working.
Yes.
So,
and especially after you see it not working so many times, you're like, okay, we're over it. We've seen it in multiple different scenarios. We clearly are not getting any closer to the actual solution that we wanted to create.
Exactly.
And that's the part where you really get to, in a refined way, like tease apart, because like the brain does want a good result in your favor. It just thinks, for example, if you have to hold on to how terrifying this was or it'll happen again. No?
Yep.
And it's like, so like some part of your brain like wants you to hold on to the negative thing, but then it's so obvious that the exact thing it's trying to protect you from, it's recreating. Like I would walk
it's perpetuating.
You never get to feel safety if you're always believing you have to protect yourself. So it's
yes. And that reminds me too, this is totally like off topic a little, but I think it's important to reference is, I don't remember if it was Tara or Sarah, one of you said like the mind is trying to solve problems and God bless it, right? It's like trying to do its best. I think we also need to remember that the mind is a beautiful thing. We don't need to hate it. Like we don't need to hate the thoughts that our brain has, because it's a fine, delicate dance between the mind and the soul. And that is a beautiful dance to learn in life, because when you do, it results in your behaviors aligning with your soul, and you just do thought work around the rest.
That's actually exactly what I was trying to say too, about the like how you can use it in ways that actually like push you down and limit you, but there is a way to constructively use your thoughts to just allow your energy, self-expression, soul to actually flow. And it is it's nuanced to know the difference.
Yes.
I would say what I've learned from you, Sarah, like I think the magic of that is self-compassion. And it's like, because so many times I've told you things and you're like, do you not hear the shame in that? Like because I think like I look at some of these thought models like logic puzzles. And so I'm just like trying to solve it. And then I'm like you said, you picked up on, Dorothy, like sometimes I kind of like shame my mind for having those thoughts in the first place. And I think what you're saying about the soul and the mind and like finding a way to align them, it's like loving yourself through some of the shitty thoughts that you might have and having compassion for yourself, like understanding that you really want these things and you may be a little misdirected, but like that's okay. We're gonna fix it, and it's okay to feel these feelings. And I just think self-compassion is my ongoing lesson that I'm still learning every day. And I think you cannot do this program without that.
100%. And that's exactly what you have to build, right? The unconditional love for yourself, the compassion for yourself. I feel like that's like the constant theme throughout the entire program.
Yeah.
And like coming into it, we talk about shitting on yourself, the shame. You literally have to let all of that go to have the healing happen. Yep. I love it.
Couldn't agree more.
I love you guys so much. Thank you. Number one, I appreciate your time and I appreciate you being here and talking about your experience, but also I know that the Bravehearts will love you and they appreciate you and your time and for being here and sharing your experience. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I love you both dearly. I'm so excited that I got to get on the phone with you guys again. So thank you for being here.
It's so nice to be back.
Yeah. I know. Thank you, Dorothy. We miss you.
I miss you guys. Bye. If you're loving the How to Get Over Your Ex podcast and you want to learn how to get over your ex in 3 months or less to build a life better than the one you thought you had with your ex, I would like to personally invite you to my next group course where we take everything you've learned here on the podcast and apply it to your life. Come check it out at www.lifecoachdorothy.com.